Hey, I'm Don Hampton. Welcome back to Bicycling for Beginners. In this episode, we're going to talk about bicycle maintenance and basic tips you could do. You know, there's nothing worse when you get out on your ride and something isn't working on your bike. So here's some things you could do in your garage before you head out on your favorite ride. We're going to break it down in a couple different categories. We're going to talk about your brakes on your bike. We'll talk about the cables that connect everything. We'll talk about the derailleurs and what they do, your chain, adjusting your handlebars and your stem, your seat, and your wheels and your tires. The cables on your bike connect your handlebar controls to everything else in your bike, whether it's your shifters to your derailleurs or your brake levers to your brakes. Making sure that these cables are in proper working order is crucial. Start by checking the outer cable housing. Make sure there's no kinks or cracks or bends in that. Inside of this cable housing is a steel braided cable. That cable should glide nice and smooth inside that housing. It shouldn't be any sticking or friction. If there is, check for dirt, check for rust, and check to make sure that cable's not frayed or broken in any way. Head down to your local bike shop. They'll be happy to either replace those cables or repair them for you. Let's talk about how your bike shifts gears. You have your shifter and you have your derailleurs. You have a front derailleur and a rear derailleur. For this instance, we're going to talk about the rear derailleur. The cable, as you shift, changes the tension, which allows your chain to move up and down and freely through the gear range. As your chain moves, you want to listen to that. Make sure there's no grinding or clicking sounds. If it does, it could be a couple different things. It could be that your derailleurs could be bent or not aligned properly. Your bike shop can help you with that. But it also could be that your cables just don't have the right amount of tension. Well, that's an easy fix because there's two little micro adjusters. There's one in your derailleur and there's one on the shifter. By turning those micro adjusters out, it increases the tension on your cable, which should help your bike shift properly. So now your chain is one of those most overlooked parts on your bike, but it's crucial for getting the power from your legs to the rear wheel and having you go. So you want to look at your chain, make sure that there's no bent links. The links should be nice and flexible. There should be no stiff links in there. So your chain should be in good shape. You want to run it through and listen and make sure that it sounds nice and clean as it goes through your gears and through your derailleur and through all the pulleys. If you hear any clicking or popping, that could be that you have a bent link or a stiff link. You also want to clean your chain. I like to use a nice little wire brush and a little rag, and you just kind of go over it, and you want to make sure you get any kind of dirt or debris off your chain. Or you could use a biodegradable degreaser and spray that lightly on there, and after you spray it on, you just want to wipe it down and get all the dirt and grime off your chain. Once your chain is cleaned, you want to make sure it's properly lubed. Now, a lot of people over-lube their chain. They'll put a big, heavy, wet lube on there, and as they ride, and as the chain moves, that excess lube gets thrown off your chain, and it lands on your bike, it lands on your legs, it lands on your shoes, it's on your skin, and it's just a mess, and it collects dirt. So that's not fun. So I'd like to use a nice little light spray lube, and I'll spray it in the back in the derailleur pulley, so it's lubing your derailleur and your pulleys at the same time. So lightly rotate it backwards, slowly, give it a little spritz, make sure you don't get it on your braking surfaces. Take that rag and wipe off the extra. Once your drivetrain is clean, you're ready to go. Let's talk about your handlebars and your brake levers. Now, these are completely adjustable, and it really comes down to the style of bike you have, your riding style, and what you feel comfortable with. But the bars come in a lot of different flavors. They come in different widths, they come in different bends, and they come in different sweeps, which comes back. But you want to have the bars set in a nice, comfortable position. I would suggest sitting on your bike in a riding position and kind of see how it feels. Take a wrench. This is a 5mm. This works perfectly. You want to loosen both bolts. Some have 4, but loosen the bolts on the front of your stem. You don't have to take them all the way out. Just loosen them enough so your bars can rotate. Now, you don't want your bars super up, and you don't want them super far down. You want a nice, comfortable position in the middle. See what feels comfortable to you. Take your wrench, and you want to tighten it back up. Now, you don't want to tighten one bolt and then the other. You want to tighten both at the same time. So you work yourself back and forth, top bolt, bottom bolt. Make sure it's snug, and you want to have equal distance between your stem cap and the stem itself. So there we go. We have it in line. Next thing is your brake lever. You could adjust this. Same thing. Same size on this bike, which happens to be the same 5mm. Loosen it up just a little bit. You don't need to go super loose with that. Now you can adjust your brake lever up and down. Now, when you're doing this, you don't want to make it too far down and too far up. You want to keep a nice even line from your fingers to the back of your hand and to your wrist. Your brake lever comes up too far, your wrist rolls back, That's not really safe, and it's not as strong, and you're not in a strong riding position on your bike. Too far down, your wrists are rolled forward, same thing. So you want a nice flat line across your fingers, the back of your hand, and your wrist. On this type of bike, I use my index finger and middle finger. You don't want to use all 4 fingers and give it a squeeze. You don't have much control. So you want to make it so you could reach it comfortably, and it's right in line. Tighten that back up. Now, you don't want to crank that down super tight. You want it just tight enough that it stays in place, but loose enough if your bike falls over and tips, it moves rather than breaking the brake lever. So you want to keep that right where you want it to be. Let's line it up again. And right about there is good for me. One little snug, and we should be good to go. Now, there's one other adjustment on your bike you can make, and you can adjust the height of your stem right here. Different bikes have different adjustabilities, and this is something that's a little bit more complex. So I recommend going down to your bike shop. They'll help you guys out and set that up. And once you have all this set up, it really shouldn't change. Your bike should feel the same every time you jump on it. If you happen to have a little mishap, the bike falls over, gets damaged somewhere or dropped, you may have to adjust it from there. But really, it's pretty. Once you have it set, you should be in good shape and enjoy the ride. So let's talk about adjusting the height of the seat on your bike. Too high, too low is going to change your efficiency and change the comfort of your ride. So start by loosening the quick release lever and sliding the seat post all the way down. I like to use the starting point of the middle of my hip as a reference, so go right about there. Make sure the nose of the seat or the saddle is in line with the top tube on your bike. Lock that quick release lever back down so it's nice and tight and secure. Throw a leg over the bike. So now when you're sitting on the bike, you want to balance on the balls of your feet, not your tippy toes and not your heel. But that's not the measurement. That's not the indicator. You want to take your foot and put it on the pedal and rotate down to the 6 o'clock or bottom position and take note of the angle of your knee. You have a nice little bend in your knee. You don't want it straight. If your seat's too high, if your seat's too low, it bends too much. That's going to really change your efficiency and also the comfort, especially if you have some knee issues or to prevent some knee issues. So that's where you want to start. There's a few other ways you could adjust your seat, but the most important one is getting the proper height. Let's talk about your wheels and your tire. Now, if your bike has been sitting in the garage or shed for a long period of time, like over the winter, you want to give these things a nice little check before you go out for your first ride. You want to make sure that they're inflated properly. On the side of your tire, it's going to have a recommended air pressure from the tire manufacturer. If it's flat, we have a whole other episode you could check out on how to change a flat. But make sure your tire is inflated properly. You also want to check to make sure there's no cracks, and the tire may get dry rotted if it sits too long. And for people like me, I like to leave those long black skid marks down nice white sidewalks. You want to make sure you have enough tread left on your tire. So make sure you have enough tread left. There's no cords or bands showing, and it's nice and safe. It's inflated properly. Now let's go to your wheel. Look at your spokes. Make sure that they're all tight. There's no loose spokes, bent spokes, or broken spokes. If that's the case, that wheel is really unsafe to ride, and you want to take that to a authorized bicycle dealer, and they'll help you out with that as well. So we got your bike about ready to go. Let's talk about how to make it stop, and here's where the brakes come into play. There's a lot of different styles of brakes out there. Disc brakes are really common. They actually have a rotor or a disc mounted to the hub with bolts. You want to make sure all those bolts are tight and secure. You want to give the wheel a little bit of spin and make sure the rotor doesn't wobble and rub on the brake pads. And you want to make sure that the rotor is clean. You don't want to touch those rotors because the grease and the oils on your fingers that your body naturally produces will compromise the integrity of the brake pads when it makes contact with the braking surface of the rotor. So you use a little rubbing alcohol and a clean rag to clean those things up. Now that you know everything's working okay, you want to check your brake lever. Make sure that it's not too stiff and not too loose. You want to make sure the pull of it feels good. Much like the derailleurs, there's little micro adjustment barrels. There's one on the lever, and there's one down on the brake calipers. You want to adjust those the same way we did with your derailleurs and make sure that the cable is functioning properly. There's also hydraulic brakes, and that's the next level if you want to get into that. But make sure your brakes work and give that wheel a little spin, no rubs, and make sure it stops. The other style of brake you're going to come across are rim brakes, and it's exactly that. When you squeeze this brake lever, it contracts that cable, makes these arms come in, and takes the brake pad and squeeze it against the rim of your bike. So you want to check that the brake pads have enough life on them. They're not really worn thin. You also want to make sure they're lined up properly. So take your 5mm wrench, if they are out of alignment, just loosen this bolt, get the brake pads lined up, and then just hold it with your other fingers and just snug it up, and you should be good to go. Now, lastly, you want to check your brake tension. You want to make sure that your brake levers on your front and your rear are balanced, so it takes the same amount of effort to squeeze those in. There's several other brakes you may come across out there, brake types, but basically the fundamentals are the same. Make sure you have the tension correct and your brake pads are good to go. Having your bicycle in tip-top shape is super important to enjoy the ride and have that fun factor at the ultimate level. Stop on down to your bike shop. They'll be more than happy to help you out and get your bike rolling and riding smooth. So thanks again for joining us for Bicycling for Beginners, and check out more episodes.